Chapter 338. Although Chu Xiu had issued a military order on the spot, the position of torture officer had successfully fallen into his hands. Although it was only temporary, Chu Xiu was confident that he could make it permanent. Im Buotong's face darkened, and he didn't say anything else. Guan Xiyu's words carried enormous weight. No one could refute his decisions. However, Im Buotong had always felt that something was strange. He had been with Guan Xiyu for a long time. When Chu Kuanga was the hall master, he was the Jianghu constable of the Guanzhong torture room. He had been Guan Xiyu's colleague in the early years, so he understood Guan Xiyu's personality. The Iron Judge's words were not just for show. In the early years, Guan Xiyu had indeed been extremely ruthless and wouldn't favor anyone. However, in recent years, Guan Xiyu had always made some unexpected decisions. Although it didn't damage the interests of the Guanzhong torture room, it didn't match Guan Xiyu's personality. Just like today, although Guan Xiyu didn't show it clearly, he was definitely biased toward Chu Xiu. Otherwise, Chu Xiu wouldn't have been able to get through the crisis so easily and even get promoted. However, Im Buotong didn't dare to say anything else. He could only leave with a darkened face. After Chu Xiu left the door, Yuqi followed him out. He cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and said, "Congratulations, Brother Chu. Not only are you fine this time, but you've also been promoted to torture officer. In the history of the Guanzhong torture room, Brother Chu, you are the youngest torture officer." Chu Xiu asked with a smile, "Brother Yuqi, are you envious?" Yuqi shook his head and said, "Others can't be envious of your position. I don't dare to be envious either." Yuqi was a sensible person. Others could only see that Chu Xiu had become the torture officer at such a young age, but no one saw what Chu Xiu had sacrificed for this position. He had really fought with his life on the line. Moreover, Chu Xiu had yet to stabilize his position. The news that came from the Guanxi region just now was enough to explain everything. There were people who were dissatisfied with Chu Xiu internally, and there were also the big clans in the Guanxi region stirring up trouble externally. If Chu Xiu couldn't solve all these problems within a month, he wouldn't even be a patrol inspector, let alone the position of penal officer. At most, he would be thrown into the criminal division to be an ordinary secret agent. Yuqi was cautious by nature. He didn't quite approve of Chu Xiu's extremely dangerous method. One careless move would mean losing the whole game. He was Guan Xiyu's personal disciple. As long as he steadily cultivated and accumulated experience, when he reached the unity of heaven and man realm, he could basically choose to be the head of the criminal division or a torture officer. He didn't have to risk his life like Chu Xiu. After exchanging a few words with Yuqi, Chu Xiu walked out the door. Mei Qinglian walked over leisurely from afar. Chu Xiu only cupped his hands at Mei Qinglian and didn't say much. There were many people in the main hall, so it was better to keep a low profile. When he stepped out of the main hall, Chu Yuanqing was waiting outside. When he saw Chu Xiu, Chu Yuanqing immediately went over and laughed. "I knew that Brother Chu would be fine this time. In front of Big Brother Guan, my words still count." Chu Yuanqing didn't think that Guan Xiyu was standing on Chu Xiu's side because of Mei Qinglian. He thought that it was because he had gone to find Guan Xiyu yesterday. Although Guan Xiyu hadn't given him a chance to speak, she had secretly stood on Chu Xiu's side. Chu Xiu didn't expose him. Instead, he cupped his hands and said, "Thanks to Big Brother Chu's help, I was able to successfully survive this calamity." Chu Yuanqing waved his hand and said, "Is there a need to be so polite between us? It just so happens that you are in Guanzhong. Stay a few more days before you leave." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I'm afraid I really won't have time to stay in Guanzhong this time. I just took over as the disciplinary officer, but there is some unrest in Guanxi. If I can't completely quell these matters in a month, I'm afraid not only will I lose my position as disciplinary officer, but I will also lose my position as patrol inspector." Chu Yuanqing hurriedly said, "In that case, I won't keep Brother Chu any longer. However, I believe that with Brother Chu's ability, it won't be a problem for you to resolve these matters." After bidding farewell to Chu Yuanqing, Chu Xiu directly returned to Guanxi. While Chu Xiu was still on the road, the news that Chu Xiu had taken over as the disciplinary officer came from Guanxi. Chu Xiu's subordinates were naturally celebrating. Although they had confidence in Chu Xiu, the matter of Wei Jiuduan's murder had blown up so much that they were still a little uncertain. But now, not only was Chu Xiu fine, but he had even taken the position of disciplinary officer. What did this mean? It meant that in the future, the entire Guanxi would belong to them. Meanwhile, Jiang Taoran's expression turned extremely ugly when he received the news. He simply couldn't understand what the headquarters and the hall chief were thinking. Chu Xiu had committed such a huge crime, and the Guanxi region was in a mess. In the end, this Chu Xiu was still able to become the disciplinary officer. Was there still any respect for the rules? Although Jiang Taoran was not convinced, he had no choice but to put away his dirty tricks in the dark. He began to keep a low profile and erase all traces. On the Zhang family's side in the Yuan continent, the Zhang family's elder ancestor, Zhang Wanshan, sighed and called Zhang Kunz over. He said, "Go tell all the Zhang family members and the forces that are connected to our family to stop making a fuss. The outcome has been determined. Chu Xiu has become the disciplinary officer. No matter how much we make a fuss, the Guanzhong torture room will not replace Chu Xiu as the disciplinary officer. Otherwise, the appointment of the Guanzhong torture room will really become a joke." Zhang Kunz was still a little unconvinced. He said, "Elder ancestor, are we just going to let it go this time? Once we choose to keep a low profile, our Zhang family will be completely disgraced this time." Previously, the Zhang family had aggressively joined forces with so many martial arts forces to jointly write a letter to the headquarters to find trouble with Chu Xiu. It looked like they were determined to pull Chu Xiu down. In the end, not only did they not pull Chu Xiu down, but they also allowed Chu Xiu to be promoted. If they kept a low profile at this time, wouldn't it be equivalent to admitting defeat to Chu Xiu? Anyway, in the eyes of the other martial arts forces, the Zhang family had lost a lot of face this time. Zhang Wanshan sighed and said, "Before Chu Xiu became the disciplinary officer, we could still compete with him. But now that he has really become the disciplinary officer, we will be the ones who suffer no matter how we compete. Remember, never challenge the Guanzhong torture room in the Guanzhong region. Otherwise, we will always be the ones to suffer." Since Zhang Wanshan was so insistent, even if Zhang Kunz was a little unconvinced, he could only nod and do as Zhang Wanshan said. When Chu Xiu returned to Jianzhou Prefecture, the Ghost Hand King, Du Guangzhong, and the others were already waiting at the city gate to welcome Chu Xiu. When they saw Chu Xiu coming, everyone bowed and said, "Congratulations on being promoted to the disciplinary officer, sir." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "I haven't stabilized my position yet. I heard that the Guanxi region was a little chaotic while I was away. The hall master only gave me a month's time. I have to settle all the mess in a month's time. Only then can I be considered to have completely stabilized my position. Time waits for no man. Go take over the Guanxi branch first." Wei Jiuduan was dead, and now that Chu Xiu was the disciplinary officer, the Guanxi branch would naturally be taken over by him. Whether or not the people under Wei Jiuduan were Wei Jiuduan's confidants, Chu Xiu did not plan to use them anymore. The Guanxi branch could only be his people. After everyone packed up, they immediately went to the Guanxi branch and officially began to take over the entire Guanxi region. Although the warriors under Wei Jiuduan had some complaints about the warriors who were directly under the Guanxi branch being scattered to other prefectures, they still understood the principle of a new ruler having new ministers. In addition, Chu Xiu's fierce reputation was still there, so they did not dare to say much. After taking a few days to deal with these things, Chu Xiu asked the Ghost Hand King and Du Guangzhong, "Tell me in detail what happened in the Guanxi region during this period of time. Who is behind this?" The Ghost Hand King said first, "The Jianghu is led by the Yuan continent's Zhang family. Other than the Yuan continent's Zhang family, the other martial arts forces do not have the strength nor the guts to challenge you at this time. However, after you became the disciplinary officer, the Yuan continent's Zhang family quietened down. It seems that they are ready to admit defeat, and do not want to be your enemy." Upon hearing this, Chu Xiu sneered and said, "People have to be responsible for their words and actions. Do they really think that they can pretend that nothing has happened by keeping a low profile now? How naive and ridiculous." Chu Xiu had never been a magnanimous person. After plotting against him once and failing to succeed, they kept a low profile and admitted defeat. Did they think that they could get away with this? How could it be so simple? For people in the Jianghu, it is always more effective to talk about swords and fists with them than to reason with them. If someone offends you, stabbing them with a knife is always more effective than compromising with them. Du Guangzhong said at the side, there are also some people who spread the news that you killed Wei Jiuduan in the Jianghu. They also said some dirty things between you and Wei Jiuduan clearly and logically. This was definitely done by the people in the Guanxi torture hall. I sent people to investigate. The person who did it was very careful and did not leave any traces. However, even the stupidest method of elimination could be used to deduce who was the one who secretly did it. Situ Xing and Feng Hua did not have the guts nor the reason to do it. I sent people to investigate. They were definitely not the ones who did it. Since this is the case, there is only Jiang Taoran left. There was a trace of coldness in Chu Xiu's eyes. To be honest, he did not expect that the person who did it would be Jiang Taoran. Because even if Chu Xiu could not become the disciplinary officer, it would not be his turn. What he did was purely harming others without benefiting himself. However, Chu Xiu did not want to know why Jiang Taoran did this. In any case, for him, these were the people he was going to clean up this time. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Go and inform Situ Xing, Feng Hua, Jiang Taoran, and Yang Ling to come to the torture hall branch. A new officer makes 3 changes. It is also time to clean up a group of people. To resist foreign aggression, we must first settle the internal affairs. First sort out the internal affairs in Guanxi, and then go and deal with the Zhang family." Chapter 339. In the hall of the Guanxi branch, Situ Xing, Feng Hua, Yang Ling, and Jiang Taoran were all there. However, the 4 of them were in 3 different states at this time. Yang Ling was very proud because in the end, he still made the right bet. Standing on Chu Xiu's side was always the right thing to do. Now that Chu Xiu has become the penal officer, he, who has always stood on Chu Xiu's side, will certainly get a lot of rewards. Situ Xing and Feng Hua, on the other hand, have an indifferent attitude. They are all veteran inspectors. Even if Chu Xiu plays the game of changing the emperor and changing the ministers, he still won't be able to change them. Moreover, although their relationship with Chu Xiu was not very good, it was not too bad. They did not become enemies, so they are not worried that Chu Xiu will settle accounts with them. As for the last one, Jiang Taoran, he is very nervous. Although most of the traces of what he did in the dark have been cleaned up by him, Jiang Taoran is still somewhat worried that someone will find some clues. In the hall, the 4 people each have their own thoughts. They did not even say a word. After a long time, Chu Xiu pushed open the door of the hall and walked in. The black robe that represents the penal officer looks very oppressive. His imposing manner is even stronger than Wei Jiuduan's in the past. This made Feng Hua and Situ Xing subconsciously sit up straight, not daring to be presumptuous. He went straight to the main seat and sat down. Situ Xing and the others subconsciously stood up and respectfully cupped their hands and said, "Greetings, Darren." Previously, Situ Xing and Feng Hua were still thinking that the 2 of them are veteran inspectors, but in the end, Chu Xiu, a junior, climbed over their heads. Will it be a bit awkward for them to salute Chu Xiu? But when they see Chu Xiu now, they know that their worries are unnecessary. Just by relying on Chu Xiu's imposing manner, and the strength that he has always shown, it is enough to crush them. Of course, the 2 of them still had complicated thoughts. When Chu Xiu first came to Guanxi, they didn't even look at Chu Xiu and didn't even bother to greet him. In the end, only a few years later, they had to greet Chu Xiu. This made them feel a little upset. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said indifferently, "Have a seat. We're all old acquaintances, so I won't say anything more." When Wei Jiuduan was around, the Guanxi region was turned into a mess by him. Now that he's changed, the rules will naturally have to change as well. Both Situ Xing and Feng Hua nodded their head. A new official will make a clean sweep. With Chu Xiu's character, if he is still amiable, it would be strange if the Guanxi area remains the same as before. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Actually, I only have one request, and that is to be tough against outsiders. Don't forget who is the master of the Guangzhou region." In the future, no matter who it is, if I find that he or she gives in to other martial arts forces, then don't blame me for being rude. If you don't have the ability, then find someone who has the ability to be the inspector. Situshing frowned and said, but what if those martial arts forces are forced into a corner? We're not afraid of a single force in the martial arts world, but if they join forces, the power of the Guanxi region may not be able to suppress them. If this matter is brought to the hall master, we'll all be punished. Chu Xiu said lightly, don't be afraid of making a big deal out of this. If it gets big, I'll take responsibility. All you have to do is to execute it. However, just as Situshing was about to say something, he quickly held back. Now that Chu Xiu was in the limelight, it was not a good thing to contradict Chu Xiu. At worst, he would just pretend to obey but secretly oppose. Anyway, he didn't want to have a conflict with the local martial arts forces. These martial arts forces would give him a lot of money and cultivation resources every month, which Situshing didn't lack. Why would he want to offend those people? At this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, I've said what I need to say. It's time to settle old scores. Everyone present was stunned. They didn't understand what Chu Xiu meant. However, then Chu Xiu smiled coldly at Jiang Taoran and said, Sir Jiang, what do you think? Jiang Taoran, who had been distracted, was shocked. He quickly stood up and forced a smile. He said, Official Chu, what do you mean? Chu Xiu said lightly, I should be the one asking you what I mean. Jiang Taoran, you and I used to be colleagues. I don't think the grudge between us is that big, right? You actually secretly spread rumors, trying to make me your mortal enemy. What do you think I mean? Jiang Taoran's complexion suddenly changed. He quickly said, Official Chu, I'm wrongly accused. You said it yourself. We don't have any enmity between us. How could I do this kind of thing that harms others without benefiting myself? Chu Xiu said lightly, You have to ask yourself. To be honest, I'm also very curious. Jiang Taoran's complexion became solemn. He said, Official Chu, if you can produce evidence to prove that I did this, I won't say anything. But now, Official Chu, you are fabricating this kind of thing out of thin air. I'm not convinced. At this time, Jiang Taoran's forehead was full of cold sweat. He felt that he had been careful enough. It was absolutely impossible to leave any evidence behind. He was also betting that Chu Xiu was only guessing and didn't have any direct evidence. Situshing and Fang Hua were silent. In fact, they knew that this matter was most likely done by Jiang Taoran. From the moment the news came out, they had already guessed it. Except for Jiang Taoran, no one else had any reason to do this. However, they didn't intend to get involved in this matter. They wanted to see how Chu Xiu would deal with this matter. Chu Xiu looked at Jiang Taoran with rapt attention. There wasn't the slightest killing intent in his eyes. However, the invisible pressure made Jiang Taoran's forehead full of cold sweat. You're not convinced? I don't need you to be convinced. I don't have any evidence. I, Chu Xiu, don't have the habit of relying on evidence when doing things. Too many people have died in the Guanxi branch during this period of time. I don't want to kill anymore. Now I'll give you two choices. One is to cripple your own martial arts and get out of the Guanzhong torture room. The other is, if you can't do it, I'll cripple your martial arts for you. As soon as Chu Xiu's words came out, except for Yang Ling, the three people present were stunned. They didn't expect that Chu Xiu would be so ruthless. No matter what, Jiang Taoran was the inspector in charge of 2 prefectures. Not only did he want to give up this power, Chu Xiu even wanted to cripple Jiang Taoran's martial arts. This was no different from killing him. Jiang Taoran shouted angrily, Chu Xiu, no matter what, I'm still the inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. You want to cripple my martial arts without any evidence and kick me out of the Guanzhong torture room. What right do you have? I want to go to the hall master and ask for an explanation. I don't believe that in this Guanzhong torture room, you Chu Xiu can still cover the sky with one hand. At the side, Situshing and Fang Hua couldn't sit still at this time. The two of them quickly tried to persuade him. Your Excellency, isn't this punishment a bit too heavy? Please reconsider. The two of them didn't have the slightest relationship with Jiang Taoran. Right now, they were trying to persuade Chu Xiu purely because they felt some sympathy for the death of the rabbit. Chu Xiu treated Jiang Taoran like this today. Would he do the same to them in the future? Situ Xing and Feng Hua didn't know, so they tried to persuade him. However, at this time, Chu Xiu seemed to not hear their words. He just looked at Jiang Taoran and said with an expressionless face, "It seems that you chose the second one? Well, I'll fulfill your wish." As soon as his voice fell, Chu Xiu's figure moved. In a flash, he had already arrived in front of Jiang Taoran. A golden light bloomed. The great King Kong will seal suddenly fell. The bright golden light suddenly shone in the entire meeting hall. With Chu Xiu's current strength, he could easily kill some of the weaker unity of the Heaven Realm martial artists. For example, the Wei family's ancestor. With Jiang Taoran's current strength, he didn't have the slightest strength to fight back in front of Chu Xiu. Under the Great King Kong Wheel Seal, Jiang Taoran couldn't dodge. But under Chu Xiu's Great King Kong Wheel Seal, his pitiful aura didn't even last for a breath's time. His whole body was directly blown away. However, not waiting for him to fly far away, Chu Xiu directly followed up. A palm print was printed on Jiang Taoran's dantian. The powerful palm force directly smashed Jiang Taoran's dantian and tore the meridians in his body. Jiang Taoran suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes revealed unwillingness and regret. But soon after, because he couldn't bear this kind of injury, he directly fainted. Chu Xiu lightly said, "Drag Lord Jiang out." Lord Jiang is worried about official affairs, which caused his old injury to relapse. He needs to recuperate for a while. I'm afraid he can no longer continue to be a patrol. As soon as his voice fell, several Jianghu constables immediately came in. As if dragging a dead dog, they immediately dragged Jiang Taoran out. Seeing this scene, Situ Xing and Feng Hua suddenly shivered. They had a new understanding of Chu Xiu's strength and overbearingness. But on second thought, Chu Xiu even dared to kill Wei Jiuduan. What else does he not dare to do? That Jiang Taoran was also courting death. If his little tricks were used on a reasonable person, it wouldn't be a big deal. But right now, Chu Xiu didn't want to be reasonable with him. No matter what evidence you have, if I want to kill you, then you must die. If I want to cripple you, you won't be able to leave Guanxi branch standing. Turning around, Chu Xiu showed a bright smile to Situ Xing and Feng Hua and said, "You two don't need to take it to heart. In fact, I am a very reasonable person. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. You are different from Jiang Taoran, so naturally, I won't treat you like this." Situ Xing and Feng Hua showed an ugly smile. At this time, even if they don't believe it, they have to force themselves to believe it. Otherwise, they will die very miserably. Chu Xiu waved his hand and called Du Guangzhong, Ghost Hand King, and the others in, and said in a deep voice, "At present, there are some accidents in my Guanxi branch, so there is a serious shortage of manpower. Therefore, I decided to promote some patrol to a higher position and reorganize the order of the whole Guanxi branch." Hearing this, Yang Ling, who was on the side, became spirited. Those who should be killed were killed. Those who should be crippled were crippled. It's time to harvest. Chapter 340. Situ Xing and Feng Hua were both old foxes of the Guanzhong torture room. If they did not provoke Chu Xiu would not move against them. Otherwise, if he really killed everyone, who would work for him? But Chu Xiu could not be at ease using these two people. His own people had to occupy the majority. Chu Xiu said gravely, "The prefectures that were previously in Wei Chongling's hands are now under Yang Ling's jurisdiction." It could be said that Yang Ling had put in a lot of effort in this matter, and also proved his loyalty to Chu Xiu. This prefecture was what Yang Ling deserved. Although Yang Ling's strength was not great, he was clever and capable. He had been at Wei Jiuduan's beck and call for so many years to help him deal with some chores. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to stay by Wei Jiuduan's side for so long. Hearing this, Yang Ling immediately stood up and bowed to Chu Xiu. "Thank you, official." His thanks were sincere. From this, it was possible to see the difference between Chu Xiu and Wei Jiuduan. In the past, he had followed Wei Jiuduan for so many years, but Wei Jiuduan only promised him a pile of empty promises and nothing practical. Even Wei Jiuduan's famous dragon-chasing hand, until his death, he did not pass any to Yang Ling. After following Chu Xiu, he managed to obtain 2 prefectures in succession. Although it was a little dangerous, the benefits he gained were huge. Chu Xiu continued. Jiang Taoran temporarily cannot be the inspector. The 2 prefectures under his command will be separated and managed by the Ghost Hand King and Du Guangzhong. The Ghost Hand King and Du Guangzhong had always been the ones who dealt with the most matters under Chu Xiu's command. While these 2 were not the strongest in martial arts, their overall abilities were the highest. Also, Tang Yu will take the position of Jianzhou's inspector. Among Chu Xiu's subordinates, Tang Yu and Yan Bugui's strength were basically the strongest. However, Chu Xiu could feel that Tang Yu's strength should not be limited to just this much. He was hiding his true strength, and he had not used his trump card yet. Chu Xiu didn't have the habit of prying into other people's privacy. With Tang Yu's strength, he was worthy of this position. Logically speaking, Yan Bugui's strength was more than enough to be an inspector. He was currently in seclusion, and once he came out, he would be an expert in the 3-flower realm. But with Yan Bugui's personality, he could kill people, but he could forget about being a patrol inspector. After all the rewards were given, there were 6 inspectors in the entire Guanxi area, and 4 of them were Chu Xiu's trusted subordinates. Compared to Wei Jieduan, the current Chu Xiu could be considered to have real control over the entire Guanxi area. Chu Xiu looked around at the people around him and said in a cold tone, "Right now, the Guanxi area is facing internal and external troubles. I've said before that to deal with external problems, we must first settle the internal problems. Now that the internal problems have been solved, it's time to deal with the external problems. For the next few days, sort out the forces in your hands, and finally, gather together and solve all the problems in one go." Everyone present was shocked. If the Guanxi area wanted true peace, there would probably be a lot of killing. Chu Xiu's actions in the Punishment Hall branch had no impact on the martial arts forces in the Guanxi area. These were all internal adjustments of the Guanxi branch, and it did not involve the Jianghu forces. Therefore, in the eyes of the Zhang family and the other Jianghu forces, during this period of time, Chu Xiu should be stabilizing his strength and working hard to digest the power of Wei Jieduan, the former Punishment Hall master. He should not cause trouble for them for the time being. Therefore, after a few days, the Zhang family began to prepare for the 188th birthday of the Zhang family's great ancestor, Zhang Wanshan. In the Jianghu generally, except for the older or highly respected Jianghu seniors, the martial artists of some sects and aristocratic families actually rarely celebrated their birthdays. Martial artists who had reached the oneness of heaven and man realm had a lifespan of 200 years. If they celebrated every birthday, what would it be like? It was as if they were deliberately asking others for birthday gifts. Therefore, most martial artists would only hold a birthday celebration when their lifespan was almost up, but they still had a certain amount of combat power. This year, Zhang Wanshan happened to be 188 years old, which was an auspicious number. In addition, he was not so old that his qi and blood had completely declined to the point that he could not fight anymore. Therefore, it was very normal to hold a birthday celebration. Of course, part of the reason why the Zhang family held this birthday celebration was because they were forced by Chu Xiu. Previously, when Chu Xiu was promoted to the Punishment Hall master, the Zhang family kept a low profile and did not dare to cause trouble again. This caused the Zhang family's prestige to plummet. This time, the Zhang family held a birthday celebration and invited all the Jianghu forces in Guanxi. They wanted to show them that although the Zhang family had retreated in front of Chu Xiu, it was also because of Chu Xiu's identity. The Zhang family was not worried about Chu Xiu, but the Guanzhong torture room. Now that the Wei family had been destroyed, the Zhang family had become the #1 clan in Guanxi in name and in reality. The Zhang family could admit defeat and retreat in front of Chu Xiu, but compared to the other Jianghu forces in Guanxi, they could only look up to them. 3 days later, it was the time when Zhang Wanshan's birthday celebration officially began. Juyuan Prefecture was bustling with people from the martial arts world, who came to attend Zhang Wanshan's birthday celebration. The Wei family had been destroyed, and the Zhang family was now the strongest Jianghu force in Guanxi. Since the Zhang family had personally sent out an invitation, no Jianghu force in Guanxi dared to refuse. As for the rest of the rogue martial artists, Most of them were there to watch the fun. Of course, there were also some who wanted to mingle with the crowd and make some connections. At this time, in a restaurant in the east of Juyuan Prefecture, a young martial artist who was less than 20 years old was playing with a wine glass with a bored look on his face. Although this young man was less than 20 years old, he already had the cultivation of the innate realm. Even in the Jianghu, reaching this level at this age was considered fast. A middle-aged man in the physical invulnerability realm beside him frowned and said, "Young master, the patriarch's birthday celebration is about to begin at noon. Aren't you going back now? Has the patriarch's birthday gift been prepared?" This young man was the most favored disciple of the Zhang family's younger generation, Zhang Donglai. He was not a descendant of Zhang Kun's, but his talent was the most outstanding. Zhang Wanshan had liked him since he was young. When he was young, when the other young disciples of the Zhang family trembled in front of Zhang Wanshan and did not dare to speak, he was the only one who could sit on Zhang Wanshan's lap and call out to the patriarch like a spoiled child. As Zhang Donglai grew older, his talent became more and more outstanding. Although he was a little lazy and hedonistic, Zhang Wanshan was extremely satisfied with him. In fact, if he was not afraid that the family head, Zhang Kun's, would be displeased, Zhang Wanshan would have made Zhang Donglai the successor of the family head. When he heard the middle-aged martial artist's words, Zhang Donglai said lazily, "What's the rush? Even if I go after the birthday celebration, the patriarch will not reprimand me." Seeing Zhang Donglai's lazy look, the middle-aged martial artist could not help but say anxiously, "Young master, the other young masters are racking their brains to give the patriarch a satisfactory gift to win his favor. If you take your time here, what if the others steal the limelight?" Zhang Donglai said disdainfully. "Just based on those few pieces of trash, they want to steal my limelight? Uncle Kuan, don't worry. Even if I don't give anything, the patriarch will still dote on me the most." Seeing that Uncle Kuan still wanted to nag, Zhang Donglai hurriedly said, "All right, Uncle Kuan, don't say any more. I already have an idea for a birthday gift. The Lingzhou Prefecture's Chen family recently obtained a cold jade dagger. I heard that they are preparing to offer it to the patriarch in exchange for our Zhang family's support. I intend to ask for that cold jade dagger as a congratulatory gift to the patriarch." Uncle Kuan hesitated and said, "But young master, that cold jade dagger is very precious. The Chen family still wants to use this opportunity to show off. Will they give it to you?" Zhang Donglai sneered and said, "Won't give? If the Chen family doesn't give, I just need to say a few bad words in front of the patriarch, and the Chen family will suffer the consequences. I want to see whether the cold jade dagger is more important in the patriarch's heart, or I, Zhang Donglai, am more important in front of the patriarch. If the Chen family knows their place, I don't mind putting in a few good words for them afterwards. Otherwise, I will have the Chen family give this gift for nothing." At this time, a clapping sound came from downstairs. Tanya clapped his hands and sighed. "Young Master Zhang really knows how to play. You snatched someone else's gift for your ancestor and gave it to him as your own. Is this what you call offering Buddha with borrowed flowers? No, it is more like offering patriarch with borrowed flowers. That old thing, Zhang Wanshan, is not qualified to become Buddha." Hearing this, Uncle Kuan and Zhang Donglai's expressions changed. Zhang Donglai shouted, "How dare you? Who are you?" Tanya said slowly, "I am Tanya, the new Jianzhou Prefecture's inspector. Coincidentally, my master is also preparing to attend Zhang Wanshan's birthday banquet, so I came to borrow something from young Master Zhang as a gift." Uncle Kuan's expression suddenly changed. Of course he knew who Tanya was. That was a vicious dog under Chu Xiu, and a terrifyingly powerful one at that. Wei Chongling had died at his hands. But Zhang Donglai did not react. He subconsciously asked, "What do you want to borrow?" Tanya still had a lazy smile on his face, but his words were hair-raising. "I want to borrow young Master Zhang's head as a gift." "Young Master, run." Uncle Kuan immediately acted. He pulled Zhang Donglai and tried to escape. Unfortunately, in front of Tanya's speed, it was a joke for them to escape. The two dragon-tail soul-chasing darts flashed in a strange arc as they slashed towards Uncle Kuan, instantly tearing apart his protective aura. Uncle Kuan used almost all his strength to chop off the 2 dragon-tail soul-chasing darts. But before he could heave a sigh of relief, his figure suddenly stopped moving while a wisp of disbelief appeared in his eyes. A dragon-tail soul-chasing dart had pierced through his back without him noticing. Tang Ye's figure moved and appeared in front of Zhang Donglai in an instant. Zhang Donglai's eyes flashed with terror. He shouted, "Don't kill me! I am from the Zhang family." Before he could finish his words, Tang Ye slashed a dagger across his neck, instantly cutting off his head, and putting it into a brocade box without any trace of blood on it. Closing the box, Tang Ye's lips curved into a lazy smile. The gift is in hand. Perfect. Chapter 341. The Zhang family of Yuan Continent was located on a small hill with beautiful scenery outside the Yuan Continent prefecture. The entire top of the hill was the Zhang family's manor. It was close to noon, and the birthday banquet was about to begin. Those who were supposed to go up the hill had already gone up, and there were not many people at the foot of the hill. Chu Xiu was waiting for something in the forest not far from the hill with hundreds of elites from the Guanxi branch. After a while, Tang Ye's figure appeared from the forest, holding a brocade box with a human head in his hand. "Sir, I've got the gift." Tang Ye handed the brocade box to Chu Xiu with a smile, as if he had just done something insignificant. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. He looked at the hill and said in a calm tone, "Since everything is ready, let's go celebrate Zhang Wanshan's birthday. After all, this is his last birthday." The Zhang family did not feel the chill at the foot of the hill. On the top of the hill, the Zhang family's manor was decorated with lanterns and streamers, and it was a lively scene everywhere. Because there were too many people, the Zhang family's main hall and house could not accommodate them all. So the birthday banquet was held in the courtyard. Zhang Wanshan sat in the northernmost seat, and the people from the surrounding martial arts forces came forward one by one to celebrate Zhang Wanshan's birthday and gave him their gifts. These people seemed to be competing with each other, and the gifts they gave were more expensive than the previous one. The Zhang family people who were welcoming the guests read out the gifts one by one, and the more expensive the gift, the more proud they seemed. This scene also made the people below talk about it. Someone sighed and said, "Tsk, look at the Zhang family's power. Now that the Wei family has been destroyed, the Zhang family has really become the #1 family in Guanxi." Some people said that the Zhang family had admitted defeat in front of the new disciplinary officer, and that it was no longer possible. Now it seems that it was all nonsense. Someone next to him said, "It seems that the Zhang family is much smarter than the Wei family. Chu Xiu is a new official, and the Zhang family is right not to cause trouble at this time. They should keep a low profile for the time being. The Zhang family's power is there, and it can be seen from their power now. The Wei family has been destroyed, but the Zhang family's power has not been affected at all." Almost all the people below were discussing the Zhang family's current power and influence, and all of them exclaimed in admiration. Seeing this scene, Zhang Wanshan and Zhang Kunz nodded in satisfaction. Their Zhang family's goal of restoring their prestige had been achieved. At this time, Zhang Wanshan looked around and asked, "Where is Donglai? Why did the child disappear again?" Zhang Kunz shook his head and said, "Old ancestor, Donglai has been spoiled too much by you. He's still running around at this time. But it's almost time for the banquet to start. We can't all wait for him, right?" Zhang Wanshan nodded and said, "All right, let's not wait for him for now. Let's start the banquet." Although Zhang Wanshan said so, he did not know why, but he suddenly had a feeling of trepidation, as if something bad was about to happen. Zhang Kun stood up and cupped his hands at the people present, saying, "Thank you everyone for attending my old ancestor's 188th birthday this time. My Zhang family is very grateful. Recently, our Zhang family has encountered some problems, causing some rascals to secretly slander our Zhang family. However, this birthday banquet also allowed our Zhang family to see the support of our fellow Wulin people. Our Zhang family is very grateful for it. Everyone who comes is a guest. It doesn't matter if the people outside don't have seats. I'll ask the servants to prepare more tables, and everyone can attend the birthday banquet together." As soon as this was said, The martial artists outside who were watching the bustle immediately began to praise Zhang family's righteousness and magnanimity. After all, for most of the martial arts circle sects, martial artists like them were basically ignored. Now that the Zhang family could still think of them, this matter was very magnanimous. Seeing this scene, Zhang Wanshan also suppressed the uneasiness in his heart. He stroked his beard and smiled with satisfaction. He felt at ease that the Zhang family could still have such power. However, at this moment, a voice came from outside. "Old ancestor of the Zhang family, you didn't invite me to your birthday banquet. Are you looking down on me, Chu Xiu?" As the voice came, the crowd directly separated to make a path. Chu Xiu walked straight into the Zhang family with nearly 100 of his subordinates. The other martial artists from Guanxi all made way, looking at Chu Xiu with a trace of fear and astonishment in their eyes. He came with ill intentions. In an instant, these 4 words popped up in the hearts of everyone present. The people of the Zhang family looked even more solemn. They did not expect that Chu Xiu would choose this time to make trouble for them. The Zhang family had schemed against Chu Xiu before. The enmity between the two sides was quite thorough. Under such circumstances, how could the Zhang family invite Chu Xiu to attend the birthday banquet? In the end, they did not expect that Chu Xiu would directly come without an invitation. Moreover, Chu Xiu came with so many people. Was he here to celebrate the birthday banquet? It was more like he was looking for trouble. Zhang Kun suppressed his anger. When he was about to say something, Zhang Wanshan held his hand. Looking at Chu Xiu, Zhang Wanshan smiled and said, "Official Chu is very busy every day. I was afraid of delaying Official Chu's official business, so I didn't inform Official Chu. Please forgive me, Your Excellency. However, since Your Excellency is here, please take a seat." Today, Official Chu came to give face to the Zhang family, so we naturally welcome him warmly. The attitude of the old ancestor of the Zhang family was extremely humble, which immediately stunned everyone present. After all, Zhang Wanshan was a well-known figure in Guanxi Wulin. When had he ever been so humble? Chu Xiu looked at Zhang Wanshan with a faint smile. He had never dealt with Zhang Wanshan, the old ancestor of the Zhang family, but now it seemed that this old guy was more tolerant than the old ancestor of the Wei family. Zhang Wanshan was so humble in front of him. If he made a move, it would be seen as overbearing and unreasonable. Unfortunately, Zhang Wanshan still didn't understand Chu Xiu's character. Once Chu Xiu made a decision, he wouldn't give up so easily. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Since you didn't invite me, I can only come uninvited. However, I came in a hurry and didn't prepare any expensive gifts for you. Please forgive me, Your Excellency." Zhang Wanshan quickly waved his hand and said, "Official Chu is too polite. There is no need for this." Chu Xiu shook his head seriously and said, "This won't do. Since it is a birthday banquet, there must be a congratulatory gift. If I don't, won't it seem that I, Chu Xiu, am stingy?" As he spoke, Chu Xiu threw the brocade box in his hand to Zhang Wanshan. Zhang Wanshan subconsciously caught the brocade box. The faint smell of blood coming from it made Zhang Wanshan feel that something was wrong. When he opened the brocade box, a head appeared in front of Zhang Wanshan. Zhang Wanshan immediately roared in pain, "Donglai!" For a martial artist of Zhang Wanshan's age, he had hundreds of sons, grandsons, and even great-grandsons. He had long since become indifferent to the so-called familial blood. Among his descendants, the only one that Zhang Wanshan truly loved was Zhang Donglai. Zhang Wanshan also thought of him as the future of the Zhang family. Zhang Wanshan had carefully taught him since he was a child. Now, Zhang Donglai's head appeared in front of Zhang Wanshan. This kind of grief was even more serious than the death of his son. The corners of Chu Xiu's lips curled up into a teasing smile as he said, "It's said that old Master Zhang dotes on this great-grandson of yours the most. But in the end, your birthday is right around the corner, and your beloved great-grandson isn't around. Now, I've specially brought him here for you. How is it? Chu Xiu, my Zhang family is absolutely irreconcilable with you." Zhang Wanshan shouted angrily. He unsheathed a simple and unadorned longsword in his hand, and slashed at Chu Xiu with an incomparably heavy sword momentum. Previously, Zhang Wanshan did not intend to fight with Chu Xiu. It was simply not worth it to fight to the death with Chu Xiu, the newly appointed Guanxi penal officer, for the sake of a temporary dispute. But now, Chu Xiu had actually sent the head of his most beloved great-grandson to him. This also showed that Chu Xiu's attitude was to fight to the death with the Zhang family. Since that was the case, why should Zhang Wanshan endure it? Why should he retreat? He might as well give it his all and fight to the death with Chu Xiu. When the other martial artists saw this scene, they immediately retreated, their eyes flashing with fear. This Chu Xiu was really not ordinary ruthlessness. He had just destroyed the Wei family, and now he wanted to kill the Zhang family. What was he doing? Was he preparing to slaughter all the martial arts forces in the entire Guanxi region? The Avicii demon saber in his hand slashed out, and a monstrous devil chi with a dark red blood chi burst out, colliding with Zhang Wanshan's sword. Suddenly, a powerful wave burst out. In terms of pure strength, Zhang Wanshan was even stronger than the Wei family's ancestor. It was also ironic that the Wei family's ancestor had been cultivating in seclusion for more than 10 years, trying to preserve his qi and blood and prolong his life, but in the end, he was not as strong as Zhang Wanshan. However, with Chu Xiu's current level of combat strength, even if Zhang Wanshan was stronger than the Wei family's ancestor, it was only a matter of time before he killed him. Chu Xiu stood with his saber and said in a cold voice, "The Zhang family is treacherous and should be punished with death. Kill the entire family, and leave no one alive." As soon as he finished speaking, Tang Ye, Yan Bugui, and the others immediately took action, leading their subordinates to charge forward. The Zhang family was once a large family that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Wei family in the Guanxi region. There were many people in the family, about 1,000. But these 1,000 people could not compare to the elites under Chu Xiu. Whether it was the martial artists from the Guanzhong Torture Hall, or the assassins from the Azure Dragon Society like Tang Ye and Yan Bugui, their quality was much stronger than that of the Zhang family. Although their numbers were only 1/10 of the opponents, when they really fought, the result was a crushing defeat. As soon as they came into contact with the Zhang family, dozens of people were easily killed. The Zhang family's ancestor looked at Chu Xiu with bloodshot eyes and said in a cold voice, "Chu Xiu, my Zhang family has already admitted defeat. Why do you still want to kill us?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Zhang Wanshan, is this your first day in the pugilistic world? How can you be so naive? If admitting defeat and apologizing were useful, what's the use of weapons and fists? If I let you go today, the other forces in the Guanxi region will think that I, Chu Xiu, am easy to bully. They will think that the price of attacking me, Chu Xiu, is not high, so they will have the guts to challenge my authority. Your Zhang family is a living example. You are responsible for letting others know the price of provoking me, Chu Xiu." Chapter 342. Zhang Wanshan was from the older generation of the pugilistic world. He liked to think from the perspective of the older generation. Compromising and giving in were what aristocratic families with centuries of heritage were best at, just like how they had treated Chu Xiu previously. First, they would scheme openly and covertly. If they succeeded, they would hit him while he was down. If they failed, they would admit defeat and give in. Before the two parties really fought, no one would really make a killing move. It was a life-and-death struggle. However, Chu Xiu's way of doing things was the exact opposite of these people. He would either not make a move, or he would go all out and end everything. Guan Xiu had only given him a month's time. In this month, Chu Xiu had to prove his worth as the penal officer. He had to settle everything and stabilize the Guanxi area. As for how to stabilize the Guanxi area, it was very simple. He had to kill everyone in the Guanxi area, and they would naturally be stable. Zhang Wanshan closed his eyes in pain as he heard the screams of the Zhang family members being slaughtered. If he was not careful, he would lose everything. Previously, he had only thought that they would be interdependent. He could not allow Chu Xiu to continue being so arrogant. Only now did he realize what kind of existence he had provoked. When the Wei family had been destroyed, he had secretly mocked the Wei family for being too rash. In the end, it was his family's turn to ask for trouble in such a short time. Zhang Wanshan let out a long sigh. A crazed look appeared in his eyes as he said hatefully, "Chu Xiu, Since you want to destroy my Zhang family, I will let you know that my Zhang family is not something you can destroy as you wish. Even if I have to risk my life, I will break a few of your teeth, Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu smiled sinisterly and said, "Sorry, my teeth are very good. I can chew through anything no matter how hard it is. Your Zhang family is not hard enough." Zhang Wanshan did not continue talking nonsense with Chu Xiu. Blood qi surged from his body into the long sword in his hand, causing the simple long sword to turn scarlet and evil. After all, there were very few people in the pugilistic world who were as afraid of death as the Wei family's patriarch. Most people in the pugilistic world had the courage to fight to the death. Zhang Wanshan was like this. He already knew that Chu Xiu had killing intent, so he naturally did not have any hope. He did not hope to protect the Zhang family. He only hoped to severely injure Chu Xiu and perish together with him. The blood sword soared into the sky, but the sword aura was majestic and heavy. Wherever the sword passed, the ground would tremble as if it was the power of the entire earth. The world was earth, and a gentleman was a virtuous person. The Zhang clan's primordial earth sword technique was majestic and heavy, and its sword aura was extremely stable. However, at this moment, its killing intent soared into the sky, and it directly drew upon the power of the earth to slash toward Chu Xiu. The power of this sword was astonishing, but the price it had to pay was also extremely shocking. Zhang Wanshan had to consume a portion of his life force with every breath that passed. The complete suppression of power could be said to be impeccable. Even if Chu Xiu used heaven's sun gazing at air, he could not see any flaws. However, Chu Xiu did not need to see any flaws. Demonic qi gathered in his hand, and he slashed down. His killing intent soared as he stepped into the selfless killing realm. Demonic qi and killing intent intertwined. Chu Xiu directly slashed out the last move of the Avicii 3 sabers. It was a powerful demonic saber with a trace of divine judgment. As the saber slashed down, the surging demonic qi collapsed inch by inch under Zhang Wanshan's majestic sword aura that contained the power of the earth. It actually began to crush Chu Xiu. Warriors in the unity of heaven and man realm had an advantage in terms of power. When they attacked, they would be passively contaminated with the power of heaven and earth. Now that Zhang Wanshan had ignited his blood essence to unleash this sword strike, the power of the earth was infused with the earth essence sword art, causing the might of this sword strike to be extremely powerful. Even Chu Xiu's 3 blades of Avicii could not contend against it head-on. However, at this moment, a bright light bloomed in the demonic qi. It was extremely dazzling, with a holy Buddha's light. Consummate Aquarius seal. The sudden change from devil to Buddha was something that no one could have imagined, including Zhang Wanshan, who bore the brunt of it. There were martial artists who cultivated 2 completely different martial arts, and there were even quite a few of them. However, there were very few who could circulate the demonic and Buddhist martial arts so smoothly and naturally like Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had neither Buddha nor demon in his heart. For him, any martial arts was just a means to kill people. Perhaps it was because of this that he could use the 2 martial arts without any hindrance. Under the bright light, Zhang Wanshan's figure was forced back, but then he rushed forward again with his sword. The sword momentum was like the pressure of Mount Tai. At this moment, Zhang Wanshan had even given up on any defense. Every sword momentum borrowed the power of heaven and earth to erupt with the greatest power, forcing Chu Xiu to fight it head-on. As the sword slashed down, even Chu Xiu's internal organs were injured by this powerful force. His qi and blood were shaken, and his face turned pale and red. Zhang Wanshan gritted his teeth. Chu Xiu wanted to destroy his Zhang family, so he wanted to make Chu Xiu pay the price. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly raised his head in the fierce battle and said in a cold tone, "Have you fought enough? Now it's my turn." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's eyes became as deep as an abyss. The moment his eyes met Zhang Wanshan's, Chu Xiu's spirit was directly pulled into a boundless abyss, strangling and torturing him. Originally, martial arts like the great art of extinguishing heaven and earth extinguishing soul was not very suitable for people with a higher cultivation level than oneself. Even if the other party had not cultivated a secret spirit skill, the other party's powerful qi and blood alone were enough to cancel out Chu Xiu's qi and blood. But now, Zhang Wanshan was burning his qi and blood to fight with Chu Xiu. After so many slashes just now, Zhang Wanshan was already close to exhaustion. His qi and blood were extremely weak, so how could he resist Chu Xiu's great art of extinguishing heaven and earth, extinguishing soul? His spirit was immersed in the abyss, and Zhang Wanshan struggled frantically. The unwillingness in his mind made him struggle, and he wanted to pull Chu Xiu up even if he had to die. But when he had just broken free from the abyss of his spirit, Zhang Wanshan felt a chill in his chest. He looked down and saw that the pitch-black heavenly demon dance had been stabbed into his chest. As the long blade was pulled out, there was not a trace of blood on the black blade. Zhang Wanshan's eyes showed a trace of unwillingness, but he could only fall to the ground with a loud thud, completely lifeless. Ancestor. Seeing that Zhang Wanshan had been killed, the cultivators of the Zhang family immediately wailed, their eyes filled with endless grief. Compared to the Wei family's ancestor, Zhang Wanshan's prestige in the Zhang family was very high. After all, the Wei family's ancestor had been in seclusion for more than 10 years, and rarely cared about the family's affairs. Zhang Wanshan, on the other hand, was still managing the family. Although he was not the family head, he had to protect the Zhang family until now. But because of this, with Zhang Wanshan's death, the entire Zhang family was like a landslide. They no longer had the courage to resist, and they began to flee. They had lost their courage, especially in the hands of Tangya, Yanbugui, and other elites. Fleeing was useless, and what followed was almost a one-sided massacre. Seeing this bloody scene, the cultivators of the other sects could not sit still and wanted to leave. But at this time, Chu Xiu said lightly, "No one is allowed to move. The birthday banquet is not over yet, and you all want to leave. This is against the rules." Everyone's movements suddenly froze, and they all revealed a smile that was uglier than crying. What was Chu Xiu planning to do? Did he really want to catch all of them in one fell swoop? Chu Xiu looked at the people present and said calmly, "Lu family, Wang family, Qingping sword sect, War Iron Hall. I'll have to trouble the representatives of these 10 families to step forward." As soon as these words came out, the faces of the 10 families that had been named changed. This was because the Zhang family had joined forces with them to pressure the main hall, and wanted the main hall to punish Chu Xiu. Now that the Zhang family had been destroyed, from what Chu Xiu said, it seemed that he wanted to settle the score? Looking at the more than 10 people, Chu Xiu did not say a word. There was only the screams of the Zhang family disciples as they were slaughtered, and the atmosphere was extremely oppressive. Some of the 10 people even could not help but break out in cold sweat. After a long while, Chu Xiu said lightly, "During this period of time, enough people have died in the Guanxi region, and I don't want to kill again. You all don't have to die." As soon as they heard this, everyone present suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that this Chu Xiu was not crazy to the extreme, and he was prepared to catch all of them in one fell swoop. But before they could let out a sigh of relief, Chu Xiu immediately said, "But the death penalty can be avoided, but the punishment cannot be forgiven. People always have to pay for what they do, don't they? Each of you will take out half of your wealth and hand it over to the Guanxi region branch, and we will let this matter go." As soon as these words came out, the faces of the people present suddenly changed. Chu Xiu was simply demanding an exorbitant price. This was no longer cutting off their flesh. This was simply cutting off one of their legs. Just when someone wanted to refute, Chu Xiu stretched out a finger and said coldly, "I have given you a chance, but only once. Whether you want to choose or not, it is up to you." Those who wanted to refute just now immediately became listless, and did not dare to say another word of nonsense. With the Zhang family as a lesson, who would dare to disobey Chu Xiu again? This time, Chu Xiu had destroyed the Zhang family not only to kill a chicken to scare the monkeys, but also to kill a tiger in front of a group of monkeys, and the effect was quite significant. An hour later, the people of the Zhang family were completely killed. Occasionally there were a few survivors who escaped, but it was no longer a big deal. After asking people to search the Zhang family clean, Chu Xiu waved his hand and directly led his people down the mountain, leaving the many martial artists present to look at each other. Looking at the Zhang family's blood flowing like a river, everyone present could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. They were afraid that from now on, the peaceful days of the Guanxi region would be over, and everyone would be shrouded in the shadow of Chu Xiu. Only some Jianghu elders vaguely remembered that only Guan Xiyu had killed so many people when she first took charge of the Guanzhong torture room, and this Chu Xiu's methods were even more cruel and ruthless than Guan Xiyu's. Chapter 343. In the Guanzhong torture room headquarters, Guan Xiyu looked at the information that Chu Xiu had handed over, and the information from the Criminal Investigation Division's secret agent. He was silent. In less than a month, Chu Xiu had already killed so many people in Guanxi that they were terrified and had completely stabilized the Guanxi division. The information that Chu Xiu had reported wasn't much different from the information that the Criminal Investigation Division had found. Chu Xiu didn't choose to hide his various methods. However, even Guan Xiyu didn't know how to evaluate Chu Xiu now. Although he had achieved his goal of pacifying the Guanxi division, his methods were also criticized by many people. At this moment, Mei Qinglian gently pushed the door open and walked into the room. When she saw Guan Xiyu's expression, she asked softly, "Master, do you have any troubles?" Guan Xiyu handed the information to Mei Qinglian and said, "I gave Chu Xiu a month to pacify the Guanxi division. In the end he did it. However, his methods are indescribable. In the past, Guan Xiyu hated others interfering with the affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. He was also very unyielding. He wasn't called the Iron Judge in the past for nothing. However, he didn't know when it started, but he would habitually talk to Mei Qinglian about the matters of the Guanzhong torture room. After reading the information, Mei Qinglian's beautiful eyes flashed. She said, "Master, you don't have to take it to heart. In the past, none of the Guanxi division's torture officers were strong-willed. Chu Sima was a low-key person and ruled by doing nothing. Although Xiaoyi was powerful, his character was a little soft. He rarely killed people. Although Yin Batong was ruthless, he was too clever and scheming. He didn't use the right place. Now Chu Xiu's methods are decisive and ruthless. It can be said that he's a sharp sword in the Guanzhong torture room. When we need him, we can send him out. He will definitely be of unexpected use. Master, you are the hall master. You need to balance kindness and authority. When you need to show your authority, you will need to use Chu Xiu." Guan Xiyu nodded and said, "Madam is thoughtful. Let's consider Chu Xiu as the torture officer for the time being." With that, Guan Xiyu called Yuqi over and asked him to send all the official documents and official seals to Chu Xiu as the Guanxi division's torture officer to Chu Xiu. Previously, Chu Xiu, Guan Xiyu had only given Chu Xiu a month to stabilize his position. Xiyu naturally didn't prepare these things. If Chu Xiu couldn't resolve the chaos in the Guanxi area within a month, wouldn't the things he had prepared have been wasted? Hence, only when Chu Xiu received these things could he be considered the true Guanxi division's torture officer. Inside the Guanxi branch, Chu Xiu played with the official seal that Yuqi had sent over. After flipping through it a few times, Chu Xiu casually tossed it aside. Although this was something that countless Guanzhong torture room cultivators dreamed of, Chu Xiu didn't care much about it. Strength was everything. As long as Chu Xiu had strength, he could naturally obtain his rightful position. Hence, increasing his strength was the most crucial thing right now. The Guanxi area had completely stabilized. During this period, Chu Xiu was rather relaxed. He didn't go into seclusion. Instead, he first examined his own strength. Although Chu Xiu's current achievements were astonishing and he could easily kill Unity of Heaven and Man experts, other than Feng Wuling, the Unity of Heaven and Man experts who had died in his hands were old Unity of Heaven and Man experts like the Wei family's patriarch and Zhang Wanshan. The top 10 on the Longhu list might be able to kill them. Killing two old fellows was not something to be proud of. At the very least, Chu Xiu wouldn't become arrogant because of this matter. Unless Chu Xiu could kill a Unity of Heaven and Man expert like Feng Wuling head-on, Chu Xiu would be considered to be superior among those of the same level. However, there were probably not many people in the pugilistic world who could do this. The genius sword chief Feng Qishao of the Sword God Mountain with his natural swordsmanship could do it. The talented little celestial master Zhang Qingjin of the celestial master abode of the Longhu Mountain could also do it. There was also the mysterious guy who was ranked 4th on the Longhu list. He should be able to do it too. He only had 10 battle records on the Longhu list. He had attacked 11 times and killed 10 people with flying daggers. The only person he killed was a genius disciple from the Chunyang Dao sect, who was previously ranked 4th on the Longhu list. This caused the younger generation of the Chunyang Dao sect to be unable to recover from this setback. Chu Xiu had heard of these geniuses. However, Chu Xiu didn't know what their paths were. Right now, Chu Xiu was thinking about his shortcomings in the martial path. Chu Xiu's martial path was very complicated, but it wasn't that he wasn't good at it. Any martial path in his hands only had one purpose, and that was to kill people. Everything was prepared for killing people. Therefore, in summary, Chu Xiu cultivated the killing path and the fighting path. However, no martial path was perfect. Even the current Chu Xiu was the same. What he lacked now should be a body tempering technique. The martial path progressed step by step, and the physical body was the foundation. The importance of the body tempering technique could be seen from the 3 realms when one first entered the martial path. He had to completely solidify his body. Only then would he be able to control more inner force and true energy and unleash even greater power. To put it simply, the body was like a river, a lake, and the inner energy and vital qi were the water in it. If one wanted to store more water, he had to turn the river into the sea. Some powerhouses in the martial Dao Grand Master realm, even if they didn't deliberately practice the body tempering technique, their physical bodies would also gradually become stronger. This was the reason. Now Chu Xiu's strength was strong enough. With the foundation of the Xiantian skill, the power of the glazed golden silk goo, and the great primordial chaos technique of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu could already stand shoulder to shoulder with Zhang Wanshan and other old and frail martial artists in the unity of heaven and man realm in terms of pure strength. However, this was not enough. Compared with these powers, Chu Xiu's physical body was still a little too weak. This also caused Chu Xiu's physical body to suffer a certain power backfire when he unleashed these powers. This was not a good thing. Therefore, what Chu Xiu urgently needed now was a body tempering technique, a powerful body tempering technique. In Chu Xiu's mind, there were many powerful body tempering techniques that had not yet appeared. However, those places were either not available to Chu Xiu because he was not strong enough, or the time was not right. With Chu Xiu's current strength, he was not qualified to force them to appear. After thinking about it, there was a place that was quite in line with Chu Xiu's requirements. That place would appear soon, and there were many good things in it. In the original plot, someone got a good body tempering technique from it. The most important thing was that the place was very close to Chu Xiu, which could give Chu Xiu time to make arrangements in advance and give him an advantage. Chu Xiu asked someone to bring a map of the Guanxi land to West Chu. Chu Xiu pointed at a location. This was the place where the ruins would appear, Mount Deyang's Tongtian Tower. This Mount Deyang actually did not belong to the Guanzhong torture room, but it was not considered West Chu either. It should be considered one of the trade routes from West Chu to the Guanzhong torture room. It was a small path and not an important route, so there were no West Chu people guarding it. The appearance of the Tongtian Tower ruins would definitely attract many experts. If Chu Xiu wanted to gain an advantage, he had to make arrangements here as soon as possible. However, if there was no reason, Chu Xiu suddenly came to this place that had nothing to do with him to make arrangements, he would most likely be suspected. Therefore, Chu Xiu rubbed his chin and thought about it before heading to the torture hall headquarters. At the torture hall headquarters, when Guan Siyu heard that Chu Xiu had come, he was still puzzled. The Guanxi land had been completely stabilized, so why did Chu Xiu come? Walking into Guan Siyu's study, Chu Xiu bowed and said, "Greetings, Hall Master." Guan Siyu nodded and said, "Why did you come this time?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Hall Master, the Guanxi land has been completely stabilized. I have an idea that can make the Guanxi land even more prosperous." Guan Siyu raised his brows and said, "Oh, what idea?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Hall Master, my Guanxi land is only this big, so its development and potential is limited. However, I found that the small trade routes from West Chu to the Guanxi land are not managed by anyone. They belong to ungoverned areas and are very chaotic. There are small aristocratic families and sects, as well as bandits and mountain bandits. If my Guanzhong torture room can control them and turn the small trade routes into large trade routes, it can increase the influence of my Guanzhong torture room and make my Guanxi land even more prosperous. Guan Ziyu was very surprised by Chu Xiu's words. This was because the Guanzhong torture room had always sought stability over the years and was in the stage of stabilizing their strength. Including Guan Ziyu, no one had any thoughts of expanding. Chu Xiu was a newcomer to the Guanzhong torture room, yet he had such ambitions. This made Guan Ziyu very surprised. Thinking about it, Guan Ziyu said in a deep voice, "Your idea isn't bad, but do you know that your plan is very risky? It isn't that my Guanzhong land doesn't want to develop, but it is in the middle of 3 countries. No matter which direction we develop in, we will offend a country. My Guanzhong torture room isn't weak, but it isn't strong enough to go against a country." Guan Ziyu was speaking the truth. A place like the Guanzhong land, which was in the middle of 3 countries, had always been a chaotic and ungoverned area. It was basically a mess with smoke everywhere. In the end, the Guanzhong torture room rose up in this kind of situation and became the center of trade between the 3 countries. This was a very difficult matter, and it wasn't something that could be done in the future, but it was something that had never happened before. So in this kind of situation, the Guanzhong torture room had to be careful in everything they did, and didn't dare overstep their boundaries at all. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Of course I know this, so I only chose a small place that West Chu doesn't care about. Not only is it to increase the strength of my Guanxi land, it is also to give my subordinates a bit of fighting spirit. The Guanxi land is only this big. There are some inspectors and constables that slack off after rising to a certain position, and don't think about advancing. Anyway, no matter how hard they work, the state they control is only this big and this many. Now I have found a goal for them. Only with benefits in front of them can they have more motivation." Chapter 344. Guan Ziyu looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. He didn't expect Chu Xiu to be able to see so far. For torture officers, they could only see the area they were in charge of. As long as they managed the area they were in charge of, they were qualified to be torture officers. For the past leaders of the Guanzhong torture room, it was easy for them to see this. Every generation of leaders worked hard to get the Guanzhong torture room out of this predicament. However, it wasn't easy for a young man like Chu Xiu, who had just joined the Guanzhong torture room, to see this. After pondering for a moment, Guan Ziyu said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, you know the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. There are clear rewards and punishments. You were the one who requested this, so you won't be rewarded if you do it well. However, if you don't do it, it will affect the entire Guanzhong torture room. I'm afraid you won't be able to keep your newly obtained torture officer position." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Since I am a member of the Guanzhong torture room, I naturally have to think about the interests of the entire Guanzhong torture room. If everyone thinks about protecting themselves and doesn't expand, then the Guanzhong torture room will get worse with each generation." Chu Xiu's words were impassioned, but Guan Ziyu didn't know if Chu Xiu was speaking the truth. However, it was good that Chu Xiu was ambitious. Even if he was thinking about his own interests, if he succeeded in the end, it would benefit the entire Guanzhong torture room. Guan Ziyu said in a deep voice, "Since you have an idea, then do it. However, I still have to warn you to think thrice before you act." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Yes, thank you, leader." After he finished speaking, Chu Xiu immediately left. He had come to Guan Ziyu's place to find a suitable reason to make arrangements around Mount Diyang. In fact, Chu Xiu didn't care about that tiny bit of territory. The land of West Chu had many forests and mountains, so the first road to West Chu was Mount Diyang. However, because there was a huge mountain in the middle, most of the roads were narrow. There were only a few small towns in the surroundings, and there were no large prefectures. There were a few forces around Mount Diyang. Most of them were small sects and aristocratic families, but in fact these so-called sects and aristocratic families secretly colluded with bandits to rob traveling merchants. Some of them were even bandits themselves. Only most of the merchants coming from West Chu to the Guanzhong torture room had West Chu's martial arts background, so they weren't easy to deal with. So they picked up some soft persimmons and lived comfortably in a manor on the west side of Mount Deyang. Yang Tingwei, the master of the horizontal blade mountain villa, frowned as he looked at the fire slave in front of him. Yang Tingwei was very surprised that the fire slave had suddenly come to visit with the identity of a constable from the Guangzhou torture room. Although the area around Mount Deyang wasn't considered the border of West Chu, it wasn't considered the territory of the Guangzhou torture room either. There were dense forests here, so it wasn't suitable to build a large prefecture. So the Guangzhou torture room didn't care about this place in the past. However, due to the strength of the Guangzhou torture room, Yang Tingwei still cupped his hands and said, "May I know why Lord Fire Slave has come to my horizontal blade mountain villa? Are you here to buy weapons?" The horizontal blade mountain villa's Yang family was similar to some of the small forces around Mount Deyang, and they all had several identities. On the surface, the horizontal blade mountain villa's Yang family was doing the business of buying and selling weapons. The quality of the sabers forged by the Yang family was quite good. Although they were only second or third job grade mortal weapons, they were sharp and sturdy, and the price was reasonable. However, if the caravans around their horizontal blade mountain villa were weak, and the goods they carried were very tempting, they didn't mind playing the role of bandits and killing people for their goods. Of course, facing the fire slave who represented the Guangzhou torture room, Yang Tingwei put away his bandit temper and was very polite. The fire slave casually cupped his hands and said, "Villa Master Yang, I'm a constable under the Guangzhou torture room's official Chu, the Guanxi penal officer, Chu Xiao. I'm not here to do business with you, but to inform you of something." 3 days later, at noon in Qingshan Town's East Sun Tower at the foot of Mount Deyang, my lord has invited the representatives of the forces around Mount Deyang to have a drink and discuss matters. I hope that Villa Master Yang won't be late. Yang Tingwei frowned and said, "Chu Xiao? He's the Guanxi penal officer. Why does he want to discuss matters with us?" The fire slave said indifferently, "I don't know about these things. Anyway, my lord has already invited you, so whether Villa Master Yang comes or not depends on your mood. Of course, I don't know the consequences if you don't come. Villa Master Yang just needs to think about it carefully." Yang Tingwei's expression suddenly changed when he heard the fire slave's tone. The threat in the fire slave's tone was too obvious. However, Yang Tingwei swallowed his anger and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, I'll be there when the time comes." The horizontal blade mountain villa wasn't a very strong force. As the family head, he was only at the physical invulnerability realm. He probably couldn't even defeat the fire slave in front of him. Since Mount Deyang was so close to the Guanxi region, the traveling merchants had already brought the news of the Guanxi region to the surroundings of Mount Deyang. They also knew that Wei Jiuduan had died, and that Chu Xiao had become the new disciplinary officer. Facing such a terrifying existence who could easily kill a oneness of heaven and man realm expert, Yang Tingwei didn't dare to refuse. He also didn't have the strength to refuse. Incidents similar to the horizontal blade mountain villa were happening in every corner of Mount Deyang. This was also one of Chu Xiao's plans. This time, Chu Xiao needed to prepare for the appearance of the Tower of Babel in advance. He didn't want to fight with a bunch of lowly bandits here. Therefore, he had to get rid of all these people as soon as possible. Then he could go to Mount Deyang and lay out his plan in peace. 3 days later, in the largest restaurant in Qingshan Town, Dongyang Tower, at the foot of Mount Deyang, more than 10 martial arts practitioners ranging from the physical invulnerability realm to the 5 Qis gathering origin realm were sitting there, waiting anxiously. These people were all famous martial arts forces around Mount Deyang. Chu Xiao had personally sent people to inform them. None of them dared not to come, nor did they dare to be late. Instead, they had all been waiting here since early. These people were not idiots. For the time being, they still did not know what had happened. If they offended Chu Xiao, a disciplinary officer of the Guangzhou Disciplinary Hall, who was also ranked in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard, because of this, they would be out of their minds. Dongyang Tower was silent. At this time, Yang Tingwei spoke first. "Do you know what happened? Chu Xiao is the penal officer of Guangzhou torture room. Why did he come to Mount Deyang? Boss Chen, do Do you know any inside information? Yang Tingwei turned his eyes to a middle-aged martial arts practitioner in a black robe with a full beard. This man was the leader of Thundercloud Stronghold, Black Demon Hand, Chen Yun. Thundercloud Stronghold was the largest bandit stronghold around Mount Deyang. Most of the forces around Mount Deyang were guest bandits, but Chen Yun's Thundercloud Stronghold was a professional bandit. They only relied on robbing merchants to support themselves. One could imagine how strong the Thundercloud Stronghold was. In fact, Thundercloud Stronghold was indeed the largest force around Mount Deyang. Chen Yun himself had the cultivation of 5 cheese collecting in origin. At this time, hearing Yang Tingwei's question, Chen Yun waved his hand and said in a rough voice, "How would I know what Chu Xiu is up to? However, I only know that Chu Xiu is an outsider and we are on the same side. As long as we are united and don't be divided by Chu Xiu, no matter what Chu Xiu wants to do, we won't be at a disadvantage." Everyone present nodded their heads in agreement. However, at this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from outside. Everyone in the hall immediately fell silent and subconsciously sat up straight. Chu Xiu was wearing a black robe and walked slowly into the hall. Although he was the youngest among the people present, the aura he carried was extremely terrifying. Every step he took seemed to trample on the hearts of the crowd, causing them to feel uneasy. Walking straight to the main seat, Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said in a deep voice, "My name is Chu Xiu. I am the Guanxi penal officer under the Guanzhong torture room. I think everyone should know me." Yang Tingwei was the first to stand up and said, "Official Chu is famous in the martial world. Of course we know you. I am Yang." However, before Yang Tingwei could finish, he was interrupted by Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu said coldly, "There is no need to introduce yourself. I don't have that much time to listen. You only need to know who I am. As for who you are, I have no time or interest to know." As soon as this was said, Yang Tingwei's face immediately turned red. The eyes of the others also showed a hint of anger. They had seen arrogant people, but they had never seen someone as arrogant as Chu Xiu. "It was you, Chu Xiu, who called us here, but now you don't even want to know our names and identities. What is this? Humiliation? You deliberately called us here just to humiliate us?" However, although these people were indignant, they dared not say anything because of Chu Xiu's identity and prestige. Glancing at the people present, Chu Xiu said lightly, "I am here today to inform you of one thing. From today on, all the mountain roads around Mount Deyang will be included in the scope of the Guanzhong torture room, and under the jurisdiction of Guanxi. The local martial arts forces will also be under the supervision of the Guanzhong torture room. Don't be a bandit anymore. It is too degrading and you can't get any benefits. From today on, your forces will set up checkpoints on the mountain roads around Mount Deyang and collect tolls. As long as the caravans pay the tolls, you must ensure their safety. You can discuss the tolls yourself, but 60% of them will be handed over to the Guanxi branch." As soon as this was said, the people present suddenly exploded. They had never expected that this time, Chu Xiu came to take them in, and even wanted to deprive them of all their current benefits. One of the martial artists couldn't help but stand up and say angrily, "Official Chu, don't you think this is a little?" As soon as the martial artist stood up, before he could finish his words, Chu Xiu looked at him and performed the art of extinguishing heaven and destroying earth and soul transfer. His powerful mental strength directly poured into the martial artist's mind. The next moment, the martial artist with the strength of physical invulnerability realm instantly bled from his 7 orifices. He twitched a few times and directly fell to the ground dead. Chu Xiu looked at the crowd, who instantly kept quiet out of fear, and said emotionlessly, "There's one thing you're mistaken about. This time around, I'm not here to discuss matters with you. I'm just here to inform you. So what you need to do is to obey. Of course, you can also choose to resist. This is your freedom." Chapter 345. Chu Xiu's domineering attitude infuriated everyone present. But what could they do besides being angry? Be it in terms of strength or status, they were not a match for Chu Xiu. If they were to jump out and oppose Chu Xiu at this time, even if they were to say one more word like that fellow just now, It would be a very miserable thing. Chun Yun of the Thundercloud Stronghold was the first to stand up and say, "Since official Chu has said so, the Thundercloud Stronghold has no objections. When we go back, we will immediately order our subordinates to carry it out." At this time, Chun Yun was as obedient as he could be. He was like a completely different person from the previous ruthless leader of the Thundercloud Stronghold, Black Demon Hand. At this time, everyone present was secretly cursing Chun Yun for seeming straightforward, but actually cunning. Just now he was the one who said that everyone should unite to fight against Chu Xiu. But now he was the first to take the lead and admit defeat. Of course, from Chun Yun's point of view, a wise man submits to circumstances. He would not do something that would send him to his death. When the others saw Chun Yun's attitude, they could only obediently bow their heads and accept their fate. It did not matter if they were sincerely convinced by Chu Xiu. In any case, it was enough as long as they were convinced. Looking at everyone, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Those who are obedient will not die, nor will they suffer losses. You will be glad that you made the choice today. All right, you can all leave." Chu Xiu had said that he would treat them to a banquet, but in the end, not to mention wine, they did not even get to eat a single leaf. Of course, at this time, no one would care about this. To them, being able to survive this time was already very fortunate. After sending these people away, the Ghost Hand Monarch walked in and said in surprise, "Sir, it's done just like that?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "What else can I do?" For most people, it was impossible to reason with them. It would be easier to just draw their swords and sabers as soon as they appeared. If they don't obey, they will die. It is that simple. Sometimes, people will be lost in the face of benefits, but it is a good choice to make in the face of life and death. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, the Ghost Hand King suddenly felt a chill. Even though he was very loyal to Chu Xiu, he couldn't help but think that Chu Xiu's way of thinking was extremely crooked. In other words, those who submit to me will prosper, and those who oppose me will perish. However, other than the Kunlun devil cult that was at its peak 1,000 years ago, it seemed like no one, not even the Taoist and Buddhist sects, could reach such heights. The Ghost Hand Monarch shook his head to get rid of the messy thoughts in his mind. He said in a deep voice, "Sir, I have prepared the things you asked me to prepare." With that, the Ghost Hand King gave Chu Xiu 5 palm-sized pocket-sized array discs. Ghost Hand King was proficient in some array Dao. What Chu Xiu asked Ghost Hand King to prepare was very simple. It was just an auxiliary 5 elements array. This kind of 5 elements array did not have the slightest lethality. Its only function was to distinguish the direction according to the power of the 5 elements. As long as there was enough power supply, the array could always monitor the surrounding movements and transmit it to Chu Xiu. Of course, for most people, this kind of thing was relatively useless, but for Chu Xiu it was very useful. This was because these 5 array discs could provide Chu Xiu with a clear direction after the Tower of Babel reappeared. It could also monitor the movements of a group of people, so that Chu Xiu would not become blind. In the original plot, Chu Xiu had heard that after the Tower of Babel was opened, not only would one be lost to the point of not being able to distinguish north from south, but they would also not be able to distinguish between the sky and the ground. When the time came, those who were still in the Tower of Babel would be permanently sealed underground. At that time, there seemed to be no other way but to commit suicide. The martial arts forces around Mount Deyang had been controlled. In the past few days, Chu Xiu had carefully set up the array discs on Mount Deyang, not wanting others to find them. The name Mount Deyang was very domineering, but in fact Mount Deyang was not very big. Legend had it that Mount Deyang was also a famous mountain and river in the past. It had even produced an emperor of a country, so it was respectfully called Mount Deyang. There were also top sects in the world on the mountain. Unfortunately, during the Great Calamity 10,000 years ago, the once majestic and magnificent Mount Deyang had been reduced to its current state. It was just an ordinary little hill. However, Chu Xiu knew that although the legend was not credible, it was not groundless. There were no top sects in the pugilistic world on Mount Deyang, but there was something left by the top sects in the pugilistic world, which was the Tower of Babel. The builders of the Tower of Babel were established by a famous sect in ancient times, the Tongtian martial sect. The Tongtian martial sect was a very strange sect. They practiced Taoism, Buddhism, and diabolism at the same time. In addition to these three mainstream martial arts, the Tongtian martial sect was interested in practicing any strange martial arts and incorporated it into their own martial arts system. The Tower of Mount Diang was not where the Tongtian martial sect used to be. It was just a branch established by the Tongtian martial sect. In the past, the Tongtian martial sect had built dozens of Tower of Babel in the world. The disciples of the Tongtian martial sect could practice in them, and it was also convenient for them to collect all kinds of strange cultivation methods from all over the pugilistic world. However, the most strange thing was not these, but the idea of the Tongtian martial sect, which was to use martial arts to reach the heavens. The Tongtian martial sect firmly believed that when martial arts were practiced to the extreme, they could break the shackles of the world, break the void, transcend the human body, and become an immortal. The so-called immortals and Buddhas were all cultivated by people, so they did not care about the difference between Taoism, Buddhism, and diabolism. Anyway, in their eyes, these things were just tools on their way to heaven. Breaking the void with martial arts was just a legend. No one knew whether anyone succeeded or not. In the past, Ning Xuanji was called an immortal, but the people in the pugilistic world also knew that he was still a human and could not become an immortal. In martial arts, there was no strongest martial arts, only the strongest people. Therefore, the ancient people were not necessarily stronger than the modern people. What Ning Xuanji could not do, no one could do in ancient times. Otherwise, the Tongtian martial sect would not have held this obsession for so long until they were completely destroyed during the great calamity of ancient times. Today, the location of the Tongtian martial sect had long disappeared. Only some sporadic remains of the Tower of Babel would appear. Because the Tower of Babel all over the world existed independently, some Tower of Babel might have a lot of good things in it, while some had very little. Some had even been completely destroyed and had no value at all. In the original plot, Mount Diang, the Tower of Babel that was about to appear, was the most well-preserved Tower of Babel in history. The formation in it was almost undamaged and could still be operated. Therefore, the appearance of the Tower of Babel in Mount Diang this time was not like the other Tower of Babel, which completely appeared because of the destruction of the formation. Instead, only a part of it appeared. After absorbing the power of heaven and earth for a period of time, and replenishing its strength, it would sink into the ground again. At that time, no one thought that the interior of the Tower of Babel would be so complete. They thought that it was the Tower of Babel that had appeared in the past, which was already dilapidated and did not have many good things. Therefore, no martial Dao Grand Master took action. As a result, a group of people did not search the Tower of Babel in a short time. They only found a few things on the first floor. When the time was up, some of them escaped, while others were completely sealed in the Tower of Babel and sunk into the ground. When the news spread later, several forces teamed up to excavate the Tower of Babel. There were even martial Dao Grand Masters who tried to break the formation by force. In the end, they triggered the formation in the Tower of Babel, causing the Tower of Babel to self-destruct. The good things that were not found in it, and the people who were previously sealed in it were all killed. It could be said to be a pity. Of course, with Chu Xiu around this time, the things in the Tower of Babel would not go to waste. Moreover, even if it was really a waste, Chu Xiu did not intend to inform Guan Xiyu in advance that there were good things in the Tower of Babel this time. If Guan Xiyu did not come, the things would belong to him. If Guan Xiyu came, the things would probably belong to the entire Guanzhong torture room. 7 days later, there was a sudden violent vibration on Mount Diang, as if the mountain was collapsing and the ground was cracking. The entire Mount Diang began to tremble. The forces scattered at the foot of Mount Diang all showed horror in their eyes. They immediately got their people to prepare to escape. They thought that the Earth Dragon had turned the world upside down. Under a natural disaster, even as a martial artist, there was no guarantee that they could survive. It was just that the probability was slightly higher or slightly lower. However, before they could completely escape, a dazzling white light bloomed on top of Mount Diang. Even in broad daylight, it could be seen clearly. This time, even an idiot could guess that a treasure should have been born on Mount Diang. However, when Chen Yun, Yang Tingwei, and the others had just walked up the mountain, they were stopped by Tang Ye, Yin Bugui, and the others. Chen Yun's eyes revealed anger as he said, "Lord Tang, what is the meaning of this? Mount Deyang is where we have lived for generations. Do we not even have the right to go up now?" Tang Ye said indifferently, "Maybe in the past, but not now. Now Mount Deyang is my lord's territory. If he says that you can't go up, you can't go up." The people from the dozen forces around Mount Deyang were all agitated, seeing that a treasure had been born, but in the end, they did not even have the right to go up and see it. How could they not be angry? However, before they completely lost their temper, Chu Xiu walked over, glanced at them, and said indifferently, "You want to go in? Sure, but if you want to snatch the treasure, you have to weigh your own strength first. The thing on Mount Deyang has not been completely born yet. There will definitely be a fight for it later. If you want to snatch it now, does that mean you want to be my enemy? Do you think I should get rid of you in advance?" Under Chu Xiu's coercion, Chen Yun and the others did not even say a word and all left dejectedly. However, they also secretly hated Chu Xiu's overbearing attitude and decided to spread the news. If they could not get it, Chu Xiu would also not get it. Looking at these people's backs, Tang Ye stood behind Chu Xiu and asked, "Lord, do we need to kill all of them? These guys are holding a grudge. I'm afraid they will spread the news." Chu Xiu pointed at the soaring white light and said, "This thing is too conspicuous, and it has not been completely born yet. As long as you are not blind, you will be able to see it. Let them spread the news. A bunch of small fries will not attract the attention of the big shots no matter how much they spread the news. On the contrary, if I kill all of them, it will attract the attention of others." Chapter 346. The news of a treasure appearing in Mount Deyang was quickly spread by Chen Yun and the others through the West Chu caravans. This was also because Chu Xiu did not stop them and deliberately caused this to happen. After the great calamity of ancient times, countless relics and treasures had appeared in Jianghu. Most of the people in Jianghu had even figured out whether there were treasures among them. Due to the circulation of some information from ancient times, most of the ruins were able to roughly deduce the origins of the ruins not long after they appeared. Then they would analyze whether there were any treasures in the ruins and finally decide what level of experts to send to fight for it. Otherwise, experts at the level of Wu Dao Grand Master would have something to do. Even if they had free time, they would still delay their own cultivation. This time, some forces around Mount Deyang did not find anything special after hearing about the appearance of the Tong Tian Tower. It seemed that Mount Deyang did not have any top forces in the past. Moreover, this matter was spread by some small characters. There was no detailed information, so it was not worth making a big fuss about. However, although they wouldn't make a big fuss about it, the people who heard about it wouldn't be indifferent. Even if they sent some people to take a look, it would still be good to test the waters. What if they were lucky and there really was something good inside? For so many years, most of the forces in the Jianghu had done this, and some rogue martial artists and small sects would join in the fun. For them, it didn't matter if the things inside were good or bad. As long as they got a chance, they would never be able to get enough of it. Therefore, in just 2 days, many individual cultivators and people from some small forces who happened to hear the news nearby came. At this time, on Mount Deyang, a large area of land had cracked, and a strange round tower broke out of the ground, revealing a height of several feet. In the past, most towers had been square, but this Tower of Babel was round. It also represented that the sky was round and the earth was square, and it could reach the heavens. The appearance of the Tong Tian Tower was extremely huge, with a radius of several hundred feet, and this was only the appearance. There was a space formation inside, which was even more huge. The entire Tong Tian Tower was made of a kind of white stone. It was unknown whether it was because of the formation or the material, but the Tong Tian Tower shone with a thick layer of white light. Even in the daytime, it was exceptionally dazzling. With so many people here, this time, Chu Xiu didn't let anyone seal off the Tower of Babel. Right now, only some small characters had come, so sealing them would still be of some use. However, if some important figures came later, and Chu Xiu wanted to seal them, then he would have to fight with them before the Tower of Sky Split opened. Victory or defeat aside, he would definitely suffer a loss. Without Chu Xiu's blockade, Chen Yun and the others hastily made their way to Mount Diang. They hid in the crowd as they watched Chu Xiu, sneering inwardly. "Aren't you very arrogant, Chu Xiu?" Now that more and more people had come, it had to let go of Mount Diang and let the others in. Moreover, after learning that the relic turned out to be the Tower of Sky Split, Chen Yun and the others were very excited. The appearance of Sky Split Tower ruins could be traced. Throughout history, there had already been several Sky Split towers that had appeared. Excluding the few that had been completely destroyed, there were still many good treasures left. Although those top sects didn't care too much about them, for these rogue martial artists and martial artists that came from small forces, they could be called precious treasures. Just obtaining one of these treasures could change their destiny. At this time, the situation on Mount Diang was a bit delicate. Chu Xiu was standing in front of the main entrance of the Tower of Sky Split, which was the best position. As long as the Tower of Sky Split opened, he would definitely have the upper hand. When the others saw this scene, they rolled their eyes and had some ideas. A short and fat middle-aged man wearing a black flowery robe walked out. He cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "I am Yin Luohua of the Shu land of West Chu. I have long heard of official Chu's reputation in the Jianghu. This time, I have specially come to get to know you." Seeing this short and fat middle-aged man, the people present immediately whispered. This person's reputation in the West Chu land was not small. Three-Poison Devil Finger, Yin Luohua was considered a character among the rogue cultivators of West Chu. He was a famous unity of the world realm martial artist. This person came from a humble background and didn't have a strong inheritance. The only thing that stood out was that he had refined 3 fingers on his left hand into poison fingers. He had absorbed countless poisons and could even corrode qi. Those who touched it would even have their internal organs and meridians corroded by the poison. So even if a martial artist was stronger than his opponent, they were not willing to fight to the death with him. This was because even if they killed their opponent, as long as they were hit by Yin Luohua's poison fingers, they would have to pay a great price to expel the poison. It was not worth it at all. So in the West Chu land, this fellow was like a fly. Although his strength wasn't at the peak, no one was willing to fight with him. No matter what they encountered, as long as Yin Luohua didn't go too far, most people were not willing to become hostile with him. At this time, Yin Luohua stood out to get close to Chu Xiu. His goal was very clear. He wanted to stand in Chu Xiu's position. Of course, Yin Luohua didn't want to drive Chu Xiu away. He just wanted to take the initiative with Chu Xiu. Although this place wasn't considered the territory of the Guanzhong torture room, it was said that Chu Xiu had already included this place into his territory. A strong dragon couldn't suppress a snake in its territory. This place was too close to the Guanzhong torture room. So Yin Luohua didn't want to suppress Chu Xiu, who was half a snake in his territory. Moreover, the news of Chu Xiu killing a unity of the world realm expert was widely spread. Although Yin Luohua had the strength of the unity of the world realm, he really didn't want to make a move against Chu Xiu at this time. Chu Xiu looked at Yin Luohua's figure walking over with a smile that wasn't a smile on his face. He said, "What did you just say? Get to know each other? Are you worthy?" Yin Luohua's footsteps immediately stopped and his face darkened as he said, "Chu Xiu, what do you mean?" The smile on Chu Xiu's face disappeared and he said with an expressionless face, "Is my meaning not clear enough? I'm saying you're not worthy. I'll have to trouble you to find out what kind of people are qualified to be my, Chu Xiu's friends. What kind of people are qualified to be my, Chu Xiu's enemies. You rely on underhanded methods to make others not dare move against you. You're like a toad and a fly. Yet you dare to try to get close to me? Are you worthy?" Chu Xiu's words were extremely insulting. Not to mention Yin Luohua being a famous person in the West Chu land. Even a small character wouldn't be able to endure it. But some people thought about it, and realized that what Chu Xiu said was the truth. In the past, during the God Weapon Conference, the people that were friends with Chu Xiu were Mo Tianlin, Luo Feiheng, and Xia Xiaolu. As for Chu Xiu's opponents, they were all on the same level as Xiahou Wujiang. Although Yin Luohua had the cultivation of the unity of the world realm, he couldn't compare to these people at all. His reputation wasn't that good either. To put it bluntly, not to mention becoming friends with Chu Xiu, he didn't even have the qualifications to be enemies with Chu Xiu. At this time, Yin Luohua's face turned red from Chu Xiu's words. His heart was already filled with rage. In any case, he was considered a top figure in the West Chu land, and there were so many people here who knew him. Now that he was being insulted by Chu Xiu, if he continued to endure it, he would probably be laughed at for the rest of his life. Yin Luohua took a step forward, and his body was surrounded by a dark green aura. He shouted coldly, "Chu Xiu, you're going too far. Don't think that you can look down on us seniors in the pugilistic world just because you're in the top 10 of the Longhu list. I only befriended you because I gave you face. If I didn't give you face, who do you think you are?" As soon as he finished speaking, Yin Luohua raised his left hand, which had always been shrouded in his wide sleeves. His middle finger, index finger, and ring finger simply didn't look like human fingers. They were pitch black like ink, and there were also ferocious blood-red sharp nails on them, just like those of a wild beast. Yin Luohua's unconventional cultivation method was equivalent to harming others and himself. Basically, he would never be able to break through to the martial Dao Grandmaster level in this lifetime. Of course, for a rogue cultivator like him, being able to step into the unity of the world realm was already extremely lucky, not to mention becoming a martial Dao Grandmaster. Yin Luohua's index finger pointed out, and the black poison mist and demonic qi roared out. The aura qi actually condensed into the shape of an evil spirit that wrapped around his left arm, looking extremely shocking. Yin Luohua's own strength wasn't that strong, and the strength of his aura qi wasn't much stronger than the old and frail Wei family ancestor and Zhongwan Shan. The most troublesome part of his finger was the poison that erupted from his finger. It could corrode qi and corrode internal organs and meridians, so it was impossible to defend against it. Yin Luohua didn't even have an antidote for this poison. Although he wouldn't die immediately after being poisoned, it wasn't easy to expel the poison. This time, Yin Luohua used the three-poison demonic finger. It seemed like he hated Chu Xiu for humiliating him before, so he didn't care about Chu Xiu's identity as a member of the Guanzhong torture room. After getting the treasure, he would return to West Chu, so where would the Guanzhong torture room find him? At this time, Chu Xiu's mouth revealed a cold smile. He formed a seal with his hand, and when the fist landed, it immediately blossomed with a holy light. Perfect Aquarius seal. The blinding radiance collided with the jet black, jade-green poisonous finger, and everyone heard a miserable howl. Yin Luohua's index finger had actually been smashed apart by Chu Xiu's powerful, perfect Aquarius seal. However, although Yin Luohua's index finger was shattered and even twisted beyond shape, the dark green poison mist directly broke through the powerful force of the perfect Aquarius seal, and directly exploded into Chu Xiu's hands. In almost an instant, Chu Xiu's arms had already turned pitch black. Chapter 347. The exchange between Chu Xiu and Yin Luohua had caused the eyes of everyone present to twitch. The strength of these two people was truly astonishing. A single exchange had resulted in a situation where both sides were heavily injured. Chu Xiu's Buddhist seal technique directly shattered one of Yin Luohua's fingers. It seemed that he would not be able to recover. From now on, his nickname would become Double Poison Devil Finger. On the other hand, Chu Xiu was also at a disadvantage. Both of his arms were contaminated with Yin Luohua's poison. It would be impossible for him to participate in the fight for Tongtian Tower. Although Yin Luohua lost one of his fingers, he still had two fingers. In this way, Chu Xiu was at a greater disadvantage. However, from this point of view, Chu Xiu really had the strength to fight against a unity of heaven and man realm martial artist. But this time he encountered Yin Luohua, who was difficult even for martial artists of the same level. It could only be said that Chu Xiu was unlucky. However, at this time, Chu Xiu formed the inner lion seal in his hand. While suppressing his body, the glazed gold thread goo in his body suddenly burst out with a strange golden light, directly expelling the poison in his body. Chu Xiu shook his hand, and two streams of pitch-black blood sprayed out. When it landed on the ground, it immediately gave off a white smoke. The glazed gold thread goo was the supreme goo of Miaojiang moon-worshipping cult. Its original form was several kinds of powerful poisonous insects. It could be said that it could suppress most poisons. Not to mention that Chu Xiu had the inner lion seal technique that could suppress his own injuries. Seeing that Chu Xiu could so easily expel Yin Luohua's poison from his body, and only lost a little bit of qi and blood, everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. Was this Chu Xiu immune to poison? Looking at the flabbergasted Yin Luohua, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I've said it before. You're not worthy of being friends with me. Now that you've seen the outcome, do you still think you're worthy?" Yin Luohua's complexion was already as black as his poison demon finger, but at this time, he really did not dare to continue challenging Chu Xiu. One of the 3 poison demon fingers that he had relied on to become famous had actually been smashed by Chu Xiu today. This had already made his heart bleed. If he were to attack again, it was still unknown whether he would be able to keep the other 2 fingers. In the past, he had always used the power of his poison demon finger to intimidate others. He did not expect that he would be completely defeated by Chu Xiu today. Thinking of this, Yin Luohua could only retreat unwillingly. He even seemed to hear someone mocking him from behind. At this moment, a cold voice rang out. "If he isn't worthy to be your enemy, then what about I?" As the voice rang out, a martial artist in his 60s wearing a lake blue robe separated the crowd and walked over. Behind him were more than 10 Xiantian, inner aura, and outer aura realm disciples. This person's aura was very strong, and the gang energy around him seemed to be flashing with sharp sword qi. His face was very elegant and gentle, like a teacher in a private school. However, his eyes carried a trace of cold electricity, and people who looked at him could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Just based on his aura alone, this person was already several times stronger than Yin Luohua. Feeling the hostility from this person, Chu Xiu could not help but frown and ask, "Who are you?" Chu Xiu dared to guarantee that he had absolutely not seen this martial artist in the unity of heaven and man realm before. Even the aura on this person was very unfamiliar. However, Chu Xiu could see the intense hatred and murderous intent in the other party's eyes. This person was definitely someone who had a karmic conflict with him. However, the number of people Chu Xiu had killed was a little too many. As a result, even Chu Xiu himself had no idea how many people he had offended. The sword-wielding martial artist said coldly, "I am Ba Mountain Sword Sect's teacher Tsin. Chu Xiu, you killed my disciple, but now you don't even recognize me?" Hearing this, the people present were in an uproar. This person was the elder of Ba Mountain Sword Sect, Sorrowful Autumn Poem teacher Tsin. Because Mount Diang was close to the southwest of West Chu and the southeast of Eastern Qi, these 2 places had the most martial artists present. But Mount Diang was on the border of West Chu, so the West Chu martial artists were more numerous. They had naturally heard of this famed elder of Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Teacher Tsin's background was quite legendary. He only officially started cultivating martial arts in his 30s. Before he started cultivating martial arts, he was really a teacher in a private school. Because his surname was Tsin, the students respectfully addressed him as Teacher Cien. In reality, his real name was naturally not Teacher Cien. Later, due to a great change in his family, Teacher Tsin was accidentally saved by the people of Ba Mountain Sword Sect, and also accidentally joined the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. Everyone knew that it was important to build a solid foundation in martial arts from childhood. But Teacher Tsin had only started cultivating halfway, and it was already good that he could even start. But who would have thought that Teacher Tsin's talent was so great? Even though he had missed the best period of cultivation, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, even faster than some young disciples. As a result, Teacher Tsin quickly stepped into the realm of unity of heaven and human, and became an elder of Ba Mountain Sword Sect. But it was a pity that the step of martial arts grandmaster did not rely on talent. It also required enlightenment and accumulation. What Teacher Tsin lacked was the accumulation from childhood and youth. This caused him to have almost no chance of becoming a martial arts grandmaster in this life. But fortunately, Teacher Tsin did not place too much importance on that realm. In these years, as an elder of Ba Mountain Sword sect, Teachertsen had taught many disciples. Among them, Zhang Baitao, who had been killed by Chu Xiu, was the one who had left the deepest impression on him. Zhang Baitao was not the most talented among his disciples, but he was the most hard-working one. Teachertsen admired this. Last time, when Zhang Baitao had gone home to visit his family, Teachertsen had secretly given Zhang Baitao some good things for him to give to his father. But Teachertsen had never thought that his most beloved disciple would disappear without a trace. When Teachertsen had asked the people of Wind Sweeping Building to investigate, he found out that Zhang Baitao had died at the hands of Chu Xiu. In the past, Teachertsen did not have the opportunity to travel from West Chu to Northern Yan to find Chu Xiu for revenge. But now, the enemy who had killed his disciple was right in front of him. This time, Teachertsen could not hold back. Chu Xiu thought for a while, and finally remembered who the person in front of him was. "You are that Zhang Baitao's master? Sorry, I really did not know. Too many people have died in my hands. If I had to write down the names of every single one of them, wouldn't I be too busy?" A murderous glint appeared in Teachertsen's eyes. Purple light flashed in his hand as he gripped the hilt of his sword. But at this time, a disciple behind him pulled on Teachertsen's sleeve and said in a low voice, "Master, don't be rash. After we enter the Tower of Babel, we will take revenge for junior brother. If we act now, we will only be a joke to others." This time, Teachertsen had brought his disciple to travel the martial world. Coincidentally, he had heard the news that a treasure had appeared on Mount Deyang, so he had rushed over. He did not expect to meet Chu Xiu. Teachertsen was usually very calm, but today he had seen the enemy who had killed his disciple, so he was a little rash. He looked around and saw that everyone else was waiting to watch a good show. In their opinion, Chu Xiu and Teachertsen were both from great forces and powerful existences. It would be best for them to have a life-and-death battle here. If one of them died, there would be one less, and they would have a better chance. Teachertsen loosened his grip on his sword, but at this time a voice sneered. "Your Ba Mountain Sword sect really has no guts. He killed your disciple, but you are still hesitating here." Two people walked out of the crowd, both wearing embroidered robes and a crown. The younger one was Xiahou Wujiang, and the older one was a middle-aged man at the unity of heaven and man realm. At this time, Xiahou Wujiang had also stepped into the five qis towards the origin realm. This surprised Chu Xiu greatly. It was not that Chu Xiu looked down on Xiahou Wujiang, but it was because his path was different from Xiahou Wujiang's. Chu Xiu walked the path of battle and killing. It was easier to break through in fierce battles of life and death. Xiahou Shi mainly cultivated the imperial spirit art, and the growth of her mental power was much slower than the cultivation of her inner strength and physical body. But now, Xiahou Wujiang had also stepped into the five qis towards the origin realm. This speed was very terrifying. Looking at Chu Xiu, Xiahou Wujiang's eyes bloomed with murderous intent and coldness. Last time, he had suffered a great loss at the hands of Chu Xiu. His maidservant Chan had been killed, and this matter had been known by the entire underworld. This had caused his reputation to plummet, and he had caused countless troubles. In the end, he had been grounded by his father. But no matter what, his father Xiahou Zhen was the patriarch of the Xiahou clan, and he still felt sorry for him. Although he ordered Xiahou Wujiang to go into seclusion to reflect, he specially found a treasure that could increase mental power. He gave Xiahou Wujiang the great sun's epiphyllum that bloomed every 100 years at noon to refine it. Finally, he stepped into the five qis towards the origin realm. Only then did Xiahou Wujiang come out. But while Xiahou Wujiang's grounding was lifted, Xiahou Zhen was still worried about his son. He was worried that he would cause trouble again, so he sent a trusted martial artist to follow him. In name, it was protection, but in reality, it was surveillance. This martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm would not listen to Xiahou Wujiang for everything. Once Xiahou Wujiang did something dangerous, this martial artist would step in to stop him. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes at Xiahou Wujiang and said indifferently, "So it's you. This time, you're not hiding in the dark and scheming, and you're attacking openly? Last time, I said that if you want to play, I'll play with you to the end. Xiahou Wujiang, you still have the nerve to say that others have no guts. In fact, you have no guts either. You hid in the dark and didn't show up, letting a woman take the lead. After I killed her, you didn't even dare to let out a fart. Tell me, aren't you very gutless? Chu Xiao, you're courting death. Xiahou Wujiang took a step forward, and the mysterious aura around him dissipated. He looked at Chu Xiao with a ferocious killing intent. But before he could make a move, a deafening roar came from the foot of the mountain. Chu Xiao, today, I must kill you as a sacrifice to senior brother Heng Shan's soul in heaven. Hearing this voice, everyone present was stunned. How many people did this Chu Xiao offend? Why did everyone have a grudge against him? Chu Xiao also frowned. He felt that he seemed to be a little unlucky at this time. In the original plot, he did not know who the people who came to the Sky-Split Tower this time were, but it could not be so coincidental that they were all his enemies, right? Who were the people who came this time? You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.